I used to suffer from a lot of tightness and stiffness, which regularly led me to experiencing pains, aches, and injuries that I definitely shouldn't be having this frequently in my early 20s. And even though when I started stretching, this situation improved, it wasn't until I started doing this that all of these problems started dissolving. Full body integrating movement patterns refer to exercises that include your entire body, mobilizing every single joint and muscle and helping you work them as one complete unit. These exercises combine every single major training aspect into one single workout. That is strength, flexibility, control and coordination, muscular and cardiovascular endurance as well, and that is the most important one. They are a lot of fun to go through. For proper mobilization and warm-up, a single exercise will suffice. We're going to break this down into 3 different variations within the same set. Starting in the quadruped position, extended in our back. First, we want to flatten our feet into a complete deep squat. From here, extend our legs as far as is possible for you. And from there, you're going to shift your body weight forward, bringing your shoulders above your fingertips, keeping your heels flat on the floor. And then we're going to simply reverse the same pattern. First, as deeply into a squat as possible, then knees down to the floor, and then back into spinal extension. With the second variation taking us through complete circular motions. First, feet flat, legs extended, shoulders forward, and from here we're gonna roll over our toes, bring our knees towards our elbows, move down into spinal extension. And our third variation is going to reverse this whole thing with our knees at our arms. We're going to slide up, flatten our feet at the top of the range of motion, and then back into a deep squat, knees towards our arms, and sliding up once more. Our first crawling exercise will already prime us for the upcoming ones, starting in a quadruped position once more, raising our knees slightly, and then we're going to move asymmetrically, right hand with the left foot and left hand with the right foot, adding subtle rotation in our spine from left to right and short, controlled steps, keeping our knees close to the floor and always switching directions after a couple of steps for increased coordination and shifting the strength requirements from more leg dominant when moving forward to more upper body and core dominant when moving backwards. The extended bear crawl can help you add massive amounts of posterior chain flexibility by extending your legs as far as you can, moving into a longer triangle position, and once again, left with right, short steps, controlled movements, and if you can, extending your legs fully and always planting your heels, actively pressing them into the floor, lengthening our gastrocnemius, our soleus, our Achilles tendon, and helping us with movements that require a lot of ankle mobility. Once again, moving backwards for a more shoulder, arm, and core dominant movement pattern, and when moving forward, actively flexing our quads to extend our legs and flexing our hip flexors, pulling our extended leg closer towards our arm. The frog leap is an absolutely amazing exercise when it comes to hip mobility, lengthening your adductors, opening up your hips, lengthening your glutes and the upper insertions of your hamstrings, helping us with the problem zones that we develop over time when we spend a lot of hours in seated positions on chairs. And it's also probably an exercise most of you have done as children. And of course, reversing into the other direction, requiring a lot more strength from our upper body to push our lower body backwards into our starting position. And as you progress here, you can bring your feet even further forward with your hands behind your legs before you move into the next jump. And the same thing goes for the reversal, planting your hands behind your heels for the tiny jump and repeating as such. Incorporating lateral movement patterns is a great way to add on to this hip mobility we are building by always opening up our knees sideways, planting our hands or our fists on the floor for another tiny jump, this time from side to side, combining a lot of hip, ankle and knee mobility, a tiny bit of spinal mobility as well, and strengthening our arms and shoulders a little bit more than the other exercises through elevating our upper body, and if you can, holding the top for half a second before you release your body towards the floor. As you progress, you can increase the jumping distance while keeping your legs completely bent and always switching directions left to right. Now, while we're still working on the ape-like movement patterns, once again planting our fists on the floor, extending until our hips are above our shoulders, keeping our back extended, once again moving left with right and right with left, and once again adding the tiniest bit of rotation in our hips, controlled and slow movement patterns, now adding the tiniest bit of posterior chain flexibility, and elevating our hips above our shoulders will add even more upper body strength dominance to this movement pattern, while still requiring a lot of strength from our quads and our hip flexors, especially when reversing this movement pattern. This time a long ape-like jump, always extending one leg, pushing our hips towards the floor as hard as we can, opening up our adductors fully, especially once we extend that leg and push our hips down before we switch to the next step. A lot of upper body strength, especially once we hold the top for half a second once more, and always extending our leg before we switch directions. And here, keep your feet as parallel as you can with your toes pointed forward, so we can shift that flexibility benefit from our posterior chain towards our adductors. As usual, this video is sponsored by you. By liking this video, subscribing to the channel, watching the whole video until the end, hell, maybe even you're crazy enough to leave a comment. That is the only type of sponsorship I could ever ask for. And I will diligently use the ad money to buy even more gourmet cat food. Lengthening into a quadruped position like so, keeping our hips at shoulder height, and then switching right with left and left with right, with our knees as close to the floor as possible without touching. Now requiring a lot of abdominal strength to keep the same height and to not lose balance. And here I would highly recommend to hold for half a second to a full second even, for a lot more stabilization requirements and a lot more control benefits through the tiniest bit of static addition to our crawling patterns. The giraffe walk will have us in basically a pike position, where our hands and our feet are very close together, our legs are completely extended, and now requiring a lot of hip flexor strength to pull that extended leg all the way towards our wrist before we switch left with right, now maximizing posterior chain flexibility and anterior chain strength. And if you're not able to extend both legs completely, holding a tiny bend but still keeping your hands and feet close together will help you over time get into this completely extended position. When it comes to integrating spinal movement, crawling exercises are absolutely amazing, because your spine and your core are responsible for facilitating all of these movement patterns, and adding rotations to your spinal movement is sadly one of the things that most people neglect, especially in long ranges of motion, but can have massive amounts of benefits once we really loosen up in our spine and add this control throughout our entire abdominal musculature. Which means that here we are once again moving left with right, but this time into a complete rotation. Bring our hips, if possible, all the way down towards the floor with our leg extended before we switch, and add the same rotation into the other direction. And one amazing benefit of this exercise is that it feels absolutely amazing if you suffer from any sort of tightness or stiffness in your lumbar spine. Now, while the last exercises prioritized posterior chain flexibility and a little bit more anterior chain strength, the crab walk helps us do the exact opposite, focus more on posterior chain strength, especially in our hamstrings, when planting our foot on the floor and pulling our upper body closer, and in the reversal requiring a lot more core strength to stabilize our body throughout this movement pattern, while still putting a lot of effort onto our arms and shoulders, and helping us a lot when it comes to coordination. Because of the very uncommon movement pattern, most people don't actually walk like this, even though they should be. Since having fun is one of the most important things we want to add to our workouts, the ostrich walk is an exercise that is a lot of fun, not just to go through, but also to look at, with legs completely extended, very similar to the giraffe walk, bringing our feet all the way towards our hands. We are switching between planting our back side of our hands to the front side of our hands,
on the floor and always actively pulling our upper body as closely to our extended legs as possible, keeping our neck relaxed and our head hanging loose, adding, once again, a lot of hip flexor and quad strength, pulling extended legs towards planted hands.
The reverse tabletop walk or crawl can help us add a little bit more anterior chain flexibility for those of you who are very tight in their hip flexors and their quads, but also increasing the strength requirements for our posterior chain, and it increases the core engagement even more, especially the higher up we can move with our hips.
Well, the lateral bear had our hips at shoulder height, and the frontal gorilla walk had our hips above our shoulders. We can now combine these with a tiny bend in our knees and our hips above our shoulders for a little bit more posterior chain flexibility, and once again holding that half a second to a second in between steps for a lot more core engagement. And in general, lateral movement patterns like these help us work a lot more on coordination, because most people don't actually practice these things.
The duck walk is one of the exercises that most martial artists, especially the ones who work a lot with their lower body and have a lot of grappling work, have probably practiced before, because it helps us with hip mobility, coordination, and a massive amount of hip flexor strength, especially once we move into the lengthened duck walk that has us bringing both knees to the floor, opening up our hips all the way, lengthening our adductors, and only moving then into the next repetition, lengthening as much as we can and being even harder in the reversal, because it requires massive amounts of hip flexor strength and anterior chain strength to raise that knee from the floor before we move back into the next step.
Now, while I'm not sure that giraffes can move in a lateral fashion, we as humans are a little bit more sophisticated when it comes to our movement capabilities, meaning that we can also use the giraffe walk once again with a lateral style movement, adding a little bit more of adductor strength and inner groin strength throughout the movement pattern, while still keeping the same benefits for our posterior chain flexibility, once again with our hands very close to our feet and our legs as extended as possible, and keeping our anterior chain this time completely flexed by activating our core and our hip flexors to pull our upper body closer towards our extended legs. The worm, just like the ostrich, is a very fun exercise, a very whimsical one, moving into this upper dog position before we step closer with our feet as close towards our extended arms as we can, before we move with our upper body once more and actively pushing our hips towards the floor, activating our posterior chain all the way before we start stepping closer, activating our entire anterior chain and putting the most strength requirements onto our hip flexors and quads. And of course, in the reversal, moving with our legs first back into this upper dog position before we now require even more arm, shoulder, and core strength to move backwards with our upper body until we are in our worm-like starting position. The lizard crawl is probably one of the most demanding yet most effective crawling exercises when it comes to now integrating full body strength with a massive amount of coordination and control, and even more core strength in the reversal of the movement pattern, with a lot more upper body and shoulder dominance when we move backwards, towards a massive amount of lower body strength dominance and a lot of core inclusion throughout rotations when moving into both directions, making this one of the most holistic strength, endurance, coordination, and flexibility exercises, helping us with shoulder mobility, opening up our delts and our pectorals, helping us with hip mobility, starting with 20 to 30 seconds for each exercise, and then moving on to the next one for a complete round, working your way up to being able to do a full minute for each of those, which will probably take you 15 to 20 minutes for the complete workout if you're not taking any breaks in between. And since those exercises are very low impact but highly effective, you can pretty much do them every single day for a combination of flexibility, strength, and coordination, so you can get the most out of your workout sessions. And if you like the video, subscribe, join us. We do stuff like that very regularly, which means I'll probably see you soon. So until then, have a good one. Captain Cairo. Peace out.